Yo, what is going on, Guardians, and welcome back to another Destiny 2 gameplay video. Hey, in this video I really wanted to chat about the rule set for my upcoming tournament, as there's a lot of confusion over why certain things might be restricted and other things are not. And I really wanted to kind of break down the rules individually, one by one, because I'm so hyped for this tournament, and I know a lot of you guys really are too. So I thought it would be fun just to kind of go over these things and chat about them openly, which would be great. And before I do that, there's no ads in this video before, middle, or after, because I wanted to take a moment to talk about a sponsor whose product I absolutely love. This is a game you've no doubt heard about at this point, because people are talking about it on just about every media sharing platform. It's Raid Shadow Legends. Now, I know you've heard me talk about Raid before, and I'm doubling down because at this point I've actually played the game daily for over 3 months now. This started as a time killer and evolved into something I thoroughly enjoy playing in my own downtime every day, and it's designed to be hyper accessible to players with short bursts of available time throughout the day, just like me. I've got kids, a demanding work schedule, but Raid fills the gaps with an immersive world with incredible character design. And after you start learning the ropes, you'll eventually end up where I am in the game, collecting incredibly powerful champions that you can finely tune down to the last stat category to work synergistically with your teams for various activities in the game. And the best part is that I have some of the most sought after characters in the game, and I didn't have to spend extra cash to get them. I got them out of blue shards. I have a team of champions who have been min-maxed for absolute domination of enemy teams in PvP, kitted to the teeth with high-speed area of effect attacks to bring other players to their knees before they even get the chance to strike. And I've got another team designed specifically and deliberately to hold out as long as possible against dungeon bosses with huge health bars, while I whittle their health away with poison and burn effects, while my healer siphons health to keep my team on their feet. This is what I love most about the game, and why so many people are staying engaged with it longer than I've ever seen a community rally behind a mobile game before. The ability to use the game as a canvas to express your creativity and making unique builds and teams is arguably the absolute best quality of Raid, and Destiny community leaders like Astacross, M-Tash, and Sir Demetrius are playing too. So make sure you check it out by clicking the download link in the description and get 100,000 silver and an epic champion, Yoson, just for downloading the game for the first time. Redeem these gifts in the upper right hand corner of the screen if you use this link within the next 30 days, and get playing on mobile or desktop now. Alright, so let's get back to talking about the rules of the Play My Way tournament. And I'm really excited to talk about these. There's been a little bit of pushback, and I just wanted to clarify some of the questions we've been getting. First and foremost, let me just lay the groundwork for you here. The rule set has been designed in such a way that we're not necessarily limiting things that we think are overpowered or are too strong to create a balanced environment. That's not what it's about, okay? The whole idea behind the rule set for this tournament is basically just to guarantee, or to make sure as best we can, that players feel free to express their creativity. They feel free to use Destiny as a canvas, really, to show how they like to play the game, what they like to use, and not feel like they're going to be hindered strictly just by making that choice. So a lot of things have been removed, even some things that I enjoy using. But some things have been taken off the table, not because they're too powerful, but because we want to free players up to express their creativity. So we just don't want it to look like every other tournament out there. That's not what we're going for. And you know what? If you really like seeing the meta used in really great ways, people who really lean into that, there's so many tournaments, so many competitive events out there, and even scrimmages and swits that are happening constantly. You can tune into that content, and you can just drink that content down if that's your thing. There is definitely a place for that, but this is not that. We just want to make that clear going into it. So if you're questioning things from that standpoint, if you're like, man, why aren't you allowing spare rations to be in this tournament? It's stupid, spare ration. You're trying to defend the gun. It's like, look, we don't think it's busted. We're not saying it's too powerful. We're just saying we want this one to look a little different. That's it. So lay that groundwork moving forward, and so keep that in mind as the backdrop for all the rules that we're going to be talking about here. Okay, so rule number 1. No duplicates of any kind are allowed between 2 players. This is a 2v2 tournament, and we're saying no duplicates of any kind, basically, as a basic rule, between the 2 players. What does that mean? For example, each team is allowed only up to 1 of each weapon type between the 2 of them. So there can only be 1 hand cannon between the 2 players. I mean, this could be pretty restricting if this was a 4v4 tournament, but it's a 2v2. It's 2v2. So this is not as big a deal as some people might think that it is. Only one hand cannon between the two of you. Only one shotgun between the two of you. Only one sniper rifle is allowed between the two players. So it creates this environment where you have to, with your teammate, come up with a strategy to make sure that all your bases are covered. Okay, well, if you're going to use a hand cannon, you're probably going to want to use like a ranged, you know, special weapon of some kind to compensate for that. Or you could say, double down on it. You are our CQC guy. So if you're going to do a hand cannon, then maybe you should do a sidearm as well, or a shotgun as well. And I'll be the guy that's sort of in the back at range. You know, this actually worked out really well with me and Rhythm one time. We were doing 2v2s against challengers, and we had some highly competitive people, like people who participate in tournaments, show up. And one of the best sort of builds that we ran together was I actually did bow and sidearm. I did bow and sidearm because I was the guy who was using the bow at range to tag people up. Right, I'd hit them with the bow at range and keep their health low, and it freed him up to be. He was our CQC guy. He would ape in with a shotty and a hand cannon, and he would clean up the damage that I would do. And so it worked really well for us to actually have some distance between the two of us. Like he's major offense, I'm support. I'm making people break for cover and allowing him to be more aggressive up in the front. So there's no duplicates of any kind. Basically, we're just trying to force players to be in this position where they have to really strategize. They really got to think. They really got to consider carefully how they're going to approach this tournament. And the whole point is that makes them have more creativity, express their creativity. We're forcing them into an environment where they have to be creative. Side note, for this tournament, Ariana's Vow is not considered a hand cannon. It's going to be considered its own unique weapon type. So if you wanted to run, I know it's a pretty popular build out there for people to run hand cannon and Ariana's Vow, like a legendary hand cannon and Ariana's Vow in conjunction with each other, and using things like Lucky Pants. And we don't want to take that off the table because we don't think that's overpowered. We actually think that's a great expression of creativity. And so Ariana's Vow is not considered a hand cannon for that reason. It doesn't behave like one anyways. Again, on this no duplicates thing, each team's only allowed up to one class. You know, on the teams. You can't be 2 hunters, can't be 2 warlocks, can't be 2 titans. You have to be playing different classes. All right, moving on. Let's talk about restrictions. And these are, we try to tell people, a lot of tournaments have blanket restrictions where they say anything of this type is off the table. And one of the things we don't like is we think that when you do blanket bans like that, you end up taking some things off the table that just kind of got caught up in the mix with all those other things. And so we tried to take it more case by case. Okay? Tried to take it more case by case. So getting into this, players aren't allowed to use exotic armor that directly affects or buffs grenade usage. Now, again, this is not a blanket statement. We then break it down and we say, which are the ones that do that too much? Which are the ones that buff grenades too much? Because we don't want grenade usage, grenade spamming to overshadow gunplay too much in this tournament. So this is pretty common. Any exotic that grants 2 grenade charges is out. Guess what? Controverse holds. They're out. We think that Controverse holds, generally speaking, it buffs something that's already pretty powerful to being something that's pretty obnoxious and really just sidelines. I think personally, and some of the people on our team, I just think Controverse holds. It sidelines gunplay so much that you can have a handheld for every engagement, especially in a more controlled environment like a 2v2. You could potentially have a handheld supernova for every fight that you enter into. And it's not that handheld itself is OP, or that we hate it, but with Controverse holds, it basically just it makes it so that the best counters to it are actually not gunplay. And if you're going to have a Controverse hold handheld for every engagement, man, gunplay is just going to be way down. So Controverse is out. So exceptions to this grenade exotic rule include things like Ashen Wake. We think that Ashen Wake is really fun. It doesn't actually buff fusion grenades. It changes the way they behave. So although it directly affects grenades, it doesn't make it something that's too powerful. It's actually something that's really unique and interesting. So we want to keep unique and interesting on the table. So Ashen Wake, that's good. Things that have like grenade cooldown stuff built into them. We don't really want to take off the table. Things like Hallowfire Heart, Nezarec Sin, Verity's Brows, Heart of Inmost Light, buffs grenades as well. Frosties, Crown Tempest, these are allowed. We think that obviously those aren't directly affecting grenade usage on a scale quite like something like a Controverse or something that duplicates or gives a bonus charge. So those aren't so bad. So we'd like to see some creativity, and we think these things have the capacity to show some interesting builds. Sun Bracers as well. We decided to leave Sun Bracers on the table because they're so situational that it would be fun to see a play where throwing a ton of solar grenades is actually going to be really interesting. You know what I mean? Where it would actually affect the outcome of an engagement. So, especially in a 2v2 environment, you're only looking at, you get a kill with the melee, you're looking at just being able to kill one guy with a bunch of solar grenades. That's not going to break anything. So, all right, moving on. This is one that I think people are going to have plenty to say about. But players are not allowed to use any high-impact fusion rifle that has backup plan on it. So, talk about Wise and Rebuke, something like that. Obviously, Loaded Question is high impact, doesn't have backup plan on it. That's a static roll, but a Wise and Rebuke cannot be used in the tournament if it has backup plan. The idea is that if you are going to commit to using a high impact fusion rifle, they have great consistency and great range. If you're going to commit to using one of those, then you have to commit to the full charge rate. Okay, you have to commit to the full charge rate, and there's actually some specific bans we'll get into later, but you might say, well, Aaron Till's still busted without backup plan. And I agree with you. And we when it comes to the specific bans, you'll see that when we get into that later, Aaron Till's actually off the table anyways. So you couldn't use an Aaron Till regardless. And that's, again, that's not because we're like, it's a bad guy, even though we might think that it is. It's more because it'll be the only fusion rifle chosen if we leave it on the table. And if something makes the decision for the player, it's out. We don't want the player to feel like they don't have a choice. If something's on the table, it has to be used. And we think that Aaron Till will fit that bill. So if someone's going to use a fusion rifle and Aaron Till's on the table, it's going to be Aaron Till every time. So Aaron Till's out. We also took Quick Draw off of... we said Quick Draw is not allowed for any shotgun that has precision frame or an aggressive frame. So precision frame and aggressive frame shotties. So Retold Tale, for example, Mindbender's Ambition. If you're gonna use a shotgun of those archetypes, it cannot have Quick Draw. Because again, Quick Draw is one of those things on those shotguns, at least on those types of shotties, that if it's on the table, it's the only choice. It's not because we think Quick Draw is busted and has no place in the game. That's not it. We just don't want Quick Draw to make the choice for the player. We want the player to be able to experiment with some other types of rolls that shotguns can potentially roll. And we think those things are more interesting. So for this tournament, we'll see something different than Quick Draw. Players are only allowed to have one Armor 2.0 stat value that is maxed out at 10. In other words, if your recovery is tier 10, then your discipline cannot be tier 10. The only thing that we would clarify about that is that traction adds 10 mobility. So if your discipline is at 10 and you're using traction on your Armor 2.0, then you can't have your mobility at 9 out of 10. So people might try and bypass that rule by having two values at 10 just by having traction in their armor and thinking that'll be an oversight. But it's not going to be an oversight. So if you have traction on, we will factor that into the stat values. Players are not allowed to have any seasonal mods anywhere in their build. No seasonal mods, artifact mods, things like that. Nothing like that is on the table. No heavy weapons in the tournament. If you pick up heavy, you will probably be considered, or probably be a forfeiture of that match. If you pick up heavy, the match will end and the victory will go to the other team. Don't touch heavy. Players are not allowed to suicide for any reason. Players may want to suicide since it's a clash environment. Some players may want to suicide to get special ammo. If their opponents are running double primaries, they may want to kill themselves to get ammo. That's not allowed. Sometimes they'll kill themselves to avoid getting killed by super, or if they're getting collapsed on and their teammate is respawning, they might jump off the map to avoid giving a point to the team. All suicides will be reviewed case by case, and if the suicide is determined to be advantageous to the team that suicided, then the match will be considered a victory for the opponent, right? We get that sometimes you accidentally kill yourself. I do it all the time. I do it all the time. But if it is deemed to be intentional and advantageous, then yeah, it'd be forfeiture of the match. Let's talk about individual weapon bans. We're talking about Mountaintop Recluse, Not Forgotten, Lunasal, Chaperone, Thorn, Telesto, Lord of Wolves, Erentil, Alatha, FR4, which is now back on the table with random rolls. It's an Erentil. With random rolls, it's an Erentil. They're almost identical. So an Alatha with backup plan would be just as good as an Erentil. The spread on the projectiles is very similar, so Alatha's off the table. Spare Rations, Mindbender, Dustrock Blues, Retold Tale, Revoker because of ammo economy fairness, and Beloved. Now again, you might hear some things in there and you're like, what? You took Beloved's like the best sniper in the game. Well, here's the thing. If Beloved's on the table, it's probably going to be the only sniper rifle that's chosen. Beloved is the cream of the crop. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love using my Beloved. I have like over 5,000 kills on my Beloved right now. I love that gun so much. But we just want to see some other stuff. We want to free the player up to make some creative choices. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of omissions. You might notice Yoson is not banned. And you might be like, what? What kind of a joke is this tournament if Yoson's on the table? Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. If in a 2v2 environment, a controlled 2v2 environment, if Yoson is a problem for you and you have a hard time countering Yoson in a 2v2 environment, and this is not intended to be toxic in any way, but if it's a problem for you in that environment, you probably weren't going to make it very far in the tournament anyways. It has a huge charge time, and you have to commit to it. The tracking is really, really spotty. Like it's not that great. Every now and then it does something weird or crazy, but it's a wild card. It's not consistent. It's certainly not consistent enough to be a real competitor in a 2v2 tournament. So also, if Yoson's on the table and someone chooses it, that means there's no other fusion rifles anywhere in their builds, right? Last Word was omitted from the ban list, and people are like, why is Last Word allowed but Thorn is not? Here's the thing about Last Word. Last Word on console is pretty balanced in the range department. Like it can't hang at ranges that other hand cannons can, not consistently. It has some pretty intense recoil, so mastering that recoil is a real talent. It's a real chore. On top of that, its overall TTK is in line with most sidearms. And if somebody chooses to use a Last Word, that team is basically limiting themselves by saying, this is the one hand cannon we choose to have. You know what I mean? And the other team can have the ability to play around that Last Word. So I think that we might reevaluate this decision after the tournament, but for this tournament, we think that Last Word is interesting enough. It's got enough sort of Destiny lore value that we think it's okay for it to be on the table. Now, we understand that means that a lot of teams might choose to use one, but at the same time, they are limiting themselves. And Thorn, on the other hand, Thorn can bypass some of the range nerf. Obviously, nerfs to hand cannons because of the damage over time, the dot. And we just think it's a lot stronger. Obviously, the aim assist is higher. The 150 archetype is really strong as well. Thorn, if it's on the table, becomes an easy choice for players. And I think that Last Word, at least, there's going to be some consideration of other stuff. So, anyways, those are the main rules I wanted to mention in the video. I don't want it to go too long. But just real quick, some specific other exotic armor pieces that are banned. We already mentioned Controverse Hold, Starfire Protocol, Wormhusk Crown, Shinobu's Vow, Stompies, One-Eyed Mask, and Armamentarium. Those are the exotic armor pieces that are specifically banned. A lot of people are upset about Stompies, but just remember, Stompies is on the table. It's the only thing that'll get picked. It's not about Stompies being bad, evil, mean, right? And then comparing it to Transversives. Transversives are good, but in a 2v2 environment, there are other exotics that might be more useful than Transversives can be. So we don't think that Transversus is the only choice, you know, that a Warlock would pick. But Stompies is, as a hunter. I mean, I play plenty of Hunter. I'm not biased here. If I'm on a Hunter in a tournament and Stompies is on the table, Stompies is getting used. I just want to see some other stuff. All right. I wanted to just hit those as quickly as I could, at least. Thanks for bearing with us. Thanks for watching the video. Love you guys so much. Be warm and well fed, and I hope to see you guys in this tournament. Bye.